Hey everyone, this is Jim White with RealityCheck. I'm joined today by RealityCheck founder and my business partner, Jim Chastain. Hey Jim, how's it going?
Hey, it's going all right. I'm in Colorado. It's snowing, and so how could I be any happier?
Yeah, true, true. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to me and not be on the slopes today. So that's good.
It was a little bit of I had some decisions to make there. Let's just say.
Right, right. Priorities.
Yeah.
Jim and I were talking recently about the 2020 elections and specifically about the poll work that has been done and much discussed since the elections. And even though I think most of the polls indicated that Joe Biden was going to win the election, there still was this inaccurate estimating of the support for Donald Trump. And that really happened in 2016. It happened again this year. So, Jim and I were talking the other day about why does this keep happening? And is there something about this that people in our world and consumer insights and market research should be learning from this? And we wanted to talk about those two things today and just share our thoughts about why the Trump support seems to consistently be underestimated now in two election cycles. And then secondly, what is it that market researchers could take from this? So I don't know, Jim, what do you think about that first question? Like, why does this keep happening? Why are Trump supporters just continually being underestimated by political pollsters?
Well, as I've listened and watched to the debriefs and the analysis of the situation, what's sort of occurred to me is that they're asking pollsters about polling, and that's because that's what they know. So they end up really in a very kind of narrow view of what's going on, because really they're just talking about polling, and so when they talk about polling, they're talking about variances in sample, in terms of sample makeup or composition, or maybe we need to talk to this particular group or find them. We couldn't find this kind of voter. Mm-hmm. And I think all of that stuff can be true. It just scratches the surface of what the real issue is.
Yeah. A lot of the conversation has been about sampling problems or weighting issues of certain populations. And that's not kind of what you see as being the real sort of core issue.
No. I mean, what they're missing is a much broader context of people. People are voting based on a really deep-seated belief system that they have, and it's no different in a lot of ways than the consumer product world that we operate in. That decisions are being made based on their life experience and based on their identity, and based on how they want to see themselves or how they see themselves fitting. And those are tricky questions to ask in a poll, right? So you've got to really understand those deeply held beliefs. They're kind of deep story. You and I know the concept of deep story very well. Mm-hmm. Before you can really understand what are they going to do, and then there's that whole thing, and this just cracks me up because they're asking this one question: well, who will you vote for? And it reminds me of how many times have you been in the end of a focus group or an interview, and you go back and talk to the client, and the client says, "Well, just ask them if they'll buy
it." Right.
And my answer to that always to the client is, I'll ask them as long as you won't really pay attention to the answer. Because in that moment, if somebody might say anything.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what happens when a pollster calls somebody. They don't know what's going on in their life.
Yeah. If the election were held today, who would you vote for?
Right.
It's like I think in the consumer insights business, there's been a huge impact on how we think that's come from work in behavioral economics and sociology and psychology. I feel like in our world, people have known for a long time now that that people don't often mean what they say, that consumers lie, that they're lousy predictors of their own behavior. So, we've always kind of known, or at least for many years have known, that if you really want to understand consumer motivations, you have to use things like projective techniques. You have to be a little more clever and less blunt in understanding, what their motivations are and what they're going to do. And, I feel like to some degree, for some reason, this information has not gotten to the world of political polling. That some of the methodologies and techniques that we employ, and we meaning the consumer insights world, and a sort of take for granted, haven't yet sort of found their way into kind of mainstream political polling. And I don't know why that is.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that is either, other than there's probably just a cottage industry that is very focused on that, and that they need to crank out numbers very quickly, and that people really listen to numbers. Numbers matter, but these numbers that we're hearing in these polling kind of don't matter. Mm-hmm. First of all, the elections have gotten so close that the whole kind of margin of error, which is never mentioned, that's just forgotten. Oh, Biden's up by 4 points. Well, that's within the margin of error, and so it shouldn't be a big kind of mystery as to why that this is Trump gets more votes, because there was error. I mean, that's one thing, but I think coming back to this idea of how can we figure out a way to really get past this one superficial question that's inaccurate, and to me, the idea is, let's investigate people's deeply held beliefs in a meaningful way, and then let's measure those beliefs. And then let's attribute those beliefs to a candidate or not. But let's figure out what are the really deeply held motivational beliefs that are going to get people to vote for a candidate or not vote for a candidate, because those are likely not to change in any kind of situational context. I've got those beliefs. I'm going to hold those beliefs. And that's good. And it kind of reminds me, I was thinking the other day about, so if I were in some BMW research, and somebody said, the facilitator or an interviewer said, would you consider buying a BMW, or would you like to buy a BMW? I might say, yeah, that sounds great. I mean, I love the driving experience. I love the idea of being in that kind of car, and all these kinds of things. But the truth, and I might say that in a situation, but the truth is, I don't see myself as a luxury car guy. But I may not say that, and that may not come out. You know what I mean? And so I'm actually never going to buy a BMW, just because of that reason. But that's not something that these kind of polls and this kind of questioning is ever going to unearth.
Well, and you may give that answer, in that context, because of the people sitting around you, because of, some little cue that the interviewer's given. And I think that, when it comes specifically to the folks who support Donald Trump, that there is, I would assume, a belief system among those voters where there's a distrust of mainstream institutions. Mainstream media, certainly, of government institutions, certainly. And I think pollsters are probably included in that group of institutions that they distrust. So if they're being solicited from a pollster, there's a good chance that they're feeling perhaps a sense of social judgment, a sense of shame about admitting their support for Donald Trump. And they're not going to do that. So there's a reason why they might miscast what their behavior might be. And I think that, as a research person, you need to understand that. And you need to and you need to want to get underneath that feeling of shame, that feeling of judgment, to understand true belief systems and motivations. And that simply asking that straightforward question just isn't going to get you there.
Well, I mean, what you're saying is, to me, is like, what's the right answer? And people are primed when they're in a situation as a respondent of any kind in any research. I feel like they're always fishing for that. They're always fishing for, I mean, how many times have you heard somebody say, well, what do you want me to say? Or what do you want to hear?
Yeah.
Maybe not the exact words, but essentially that's what they're asking. Even when you're asking somebody to introduce themselves, in a focus group, and they say, well, what do you want to know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just a cue of like, I really want to perform well, and I want to give you the right answer. And that's not productive when it comes to getting to, what are again, the deep story that somebody has within them.
Mm-hmm.
Arlie Hochschild does such an amazing job in her book, Strangers in a Strange Land, of really unearthing that among a lot of Trump voters after the 2016 election. I don't feel like people are listening, and I'm saying people, I mean pollsters and politicians, are listening to that kind of, that kind of narrative. And I'm not sure why, other than maybe they don't have the patience, or maybe they just don't know about it.
And she talks about in that book climbing the empathy wall. Certainly the way that pollsters ask questions, it's not designed to do that. It's not designed to understand any voting bloc with any sense of real empathy, to get beneath the superficial and to understand kind of that deep story and those deeper seated, emotional drivers. So what do you think? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, and I think, you used the word lie earlier, that people lie. And that sounds malicious, but it can anyway. But it isn't always. I just think, in a given situation, you might answer something a certain way, and it is very much like coming back to that focus group thing. Well, at the end of that focus group, if we've been talking about BMWs the whole time, everybody's going to go, I'm going to buy a BMW.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I think they might mean it.
Yeah.
But when they get in their Toyota and drive home, and there's all sorts of stuff happening in their household, and the kids are running around, and dinner has to be made and everything, that's gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just gone. So
Jim, I've owned BMWs in my life, and I know. I
would like to think that you. That's why I wanted to use this example. I'm trying to explain myself to you.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Well, I'm not that kind of guy.
No, of course not. No.
Well, all right. So, we're talking about this in the political context, and why these inaccuracies sort of creep into the world of political polling. But talk to me about how this translates to the world of consumer insights and market research. I mean, what can people in our world learn from this? What should we take from this very sort of public display of research getting it wrong?
Yeah. Well, I think we really need to focus on asking the right questions, whether it's in qualitative or quantitative. And frankly, I think there should be more qualitative input into this. That's a given for me.
Yeah.
But even in if we just want to keep it in a polling context, let's ask some more projective kind of questions in polling, which I think is possible. You and I have talked about this social circle kind of question, which is
a very simple and brilliant projective question that's asked in the context of a survey. You want to describe what that is?
Well, it's really just asking people, instead of who they will vote for, it's asking who they feel their friends will vote for.
Yeah, the people that they know, friends and family. Yeah. So it's essentially allowing them to project their vote choice onto others. So it relieves any potential sense of judgment, socially desired response. And it apparently, I don't know how it performed in this last election, but in 2016, it was more predictive than some of the standard measures of voter intent.
I think it performed pretty well in this, from what I've heard. Just the pollsters who use that sort of questioning did tend to get things a little bit more accurately. It's not unlike asking somebody in a qualitative session, qualitative context, like a focus group or whatever. Describe the person who would find this ad really appealing. Mm-hmm. And which takes it totally off of them and puts it on to somebody else, even though they're projecting everything about themselves onto that person.
Yeah.
The more we can do that, or anyone can do that in quantitative, because getting a number is still really important. We can't overlook that. But I want that number to mean something. and to me, that it doesn't mean anything unless I see what are the belief system kind of characteristics that contribute to that number, and what is it that a candidate could say within that person's belief system that will really connect with them, where they think, well, he's one of us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Donald Trump has done this brilliantly, that he has penetrated a belief system that he's not even ever been a part of.
Yeah.
Ever. And so, that's really what he's done in a lot of ways. And that is hard for a poll to measure.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's hard for the shame reasons and a lot of the stuff you're talking about for somebody to say, oh yeah, I want to vote for that guy. Mm-hmm. He gets me. Because that's not a thing that some people will say with pride. Some people will, but not everybody.
Yeah. Well, you talk about asking the right questions being one of the key lessons here. And I think that that's absolutely right. And so often I think in the world of market research, as you said earlier, there is a desire just to ask straight out for people to predict what they're going to do. Ask them if they would buy this. Ask them if they would pay this price. And as we know, and I think most market researchers who are worth their salt know, people do tend to be lousy predictors of their own behavior. Right. So what does that allow you to do? And I think the lesson here and what you're talking about is, well, what can we measure? Well, we can measure belief systems. We can measure attitudes. We can measure emotion. To an increasing degree, we're becoming smarter about how to measure emotion. All of those things are related to or correlated to behaviors or can be. So, taking this as that kind of lesson, continue to measure those things in addition to measuring behavior. So you have some understanding of the why behind what people do. And I think that's the best predictor of what people are ultimately going to do, as consumers.
I totally agree. I mean, if there is a way to measure belief systems and aggregate those in some ways towards a candidate, towards what logic would tell you this is what a candidate's talking about. So can we attribute those to a Joe Biden? Can we attribute those to a Donald Trump or a Senate candidate or whatever, context the election happens to be around?
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I feel like that's more doable maybe than people think it is.
Yeah.
I really do. It just takes one extra layer of work and thought to go into it.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's got to be a willingness to do that, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're predicting the reality check and get into the polling business in 2024. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think after this discussion, we'll be running the whole thing.
Obviously.
Don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So just a couple of things to kind of recap here. I mean, it sounds like, one of the important lessons here is to make sure that you're asking the right questions, to understand the limitations of asking people to predict their own behavior. And be smart about how you're measuring things like their underlying belief systems and attitudes and emotion, those things that drive behavior. And then I think secondly, there is this dependence on the single measure in the political polling world, and we can see how inaccurate that can be. So, what I would add to what you're saying is, you want to triangulate. You want a mixture of qualitative understanding as well as the number that you can get from quantitative analysis. But the more pathways into understanding your consumer, the better off you're going to be, the richer portrait you're going to have of those people.
Yeah, it's a great summary. I just want to add one thing on top of that, and that is that my darkest hour in this election was when CNN, after a debate, would have a focus group of 10 to 14 people, and they would essentially really just ask them that question. So who are you going to vote for now?
Mm-hmm.
Hand raise.
Yeah.
I mean, please, whoever you are out there who's doing this, don't consider that really good qualitative research. it's surveying in a very small sample
Right.
in Ohio,
Yeah.
or wherever you are, you know.
Yeah. Might make for excellent drama post debate on a news broadcast, but don't make no mistake, that is not research.
It's not research. That's some kind of theater that is actually not all that interesting.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's the only thing I would add to it. I think what you said is a great summary.
Yeah. Well, hopefully the world of political polling will get smarter between now and 2024, and hopefully the world of market research will get smarter as well, learning from what we're seeing, happen in the political space. So anyway, thank you for not being on the slopes. Now you can go skiing. So
yeah, wow. Well, it's snowing now, so I think it's time.
All right. Terrific. And thank you all for watching. Once again, we'd love to hear from you guys. If you want to make a comment and let us know what you think of the recent polling season and the implications for market research, please let us know. Once again, Jim White with RealityCheck.
Jim Chastain with RealityCheck.
All right. Until next time, guys, be safe. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.